know I need to take a thumbnail before my light gets bad, but this is like the intimidating part of this video. Oh, Sunday, would you like to be in it? Okay, you have to stay right there because we're gonna bring books. Yeah, I didn't think so. How do I do this? Stack them here and here, maybe? My thumbnail for like last year's haul is like one of my favorite thumbnails ever, and I just don't know how I'm ever gonna top it. Okay, what if I stack this? Just know I'm gonna end up with books all over me. Now I just need the other half. Here's the thing, I have to put them back in my piles, but I had it organized nicely. This is gonna take half the time just to do this. Oh geez. I'm gonna sweat my foundation off. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad I brought a drink. Hello silly gooses, welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you are new here. This is my annual book haul. Last year it felt really out of control. I don't think I'd ever done a book haul to that caliber before. Last year I think I had around 80 books. So we are pretty much matched up to last year. I have 85 books in front of me to share with you. Maybe about half of them I've already read. It might be more like a third, including some books that like I bought after like reading the library book and wanting to add it to my shelf. I'm also feeling way better about this haul because I think it's about a wash of the number of books in my house. I recently did a huge unhaul, including like a TBR cart audit where I think I unhauled like dozens and dozens of books I didn't want in my house anymore. And then last fall, I think I unhauled another 30 or so that then we donated to little free libraries when Christine and Mo were up to visit. So I feel like between my most recent unhauls equals about 80 or so, and knowing that this is a haul of 80-ish, like I'm happy with that. You know, as long as I'm not like drowning in books in my house, it's pretty much one in, one out. Like, that is fine. That is fine. Let's just do this thing. I'm not going to talk in depth about each of them, obviously. If I even talked about every single book for a minute, we'd be here for an hour and a half. So we're not going to do that, but we are just going to dive into my arbitrary categories, starting with the books that I have not hauled but have already read. First on my have not hauled but have read pile is Jade City by Fonda Lee. I haven't even taken the sticker off. I have read this whole series, adore the whole series. I read them on audiobook, and I have been telling my boyfriend that I just know that he will love them. So I bought it because he's much more of a physical book person, and also I wanted to own it. But we are reading the Game of Thrones series together right now, and I have gently suggested that this be the next series that he read, and I may read it with him again because they're just that good. So anyways, number one. Next I have The Memory Collectors by Kim Neville. This I read as an ARC like maybe 2 years ago, and it really surprised me. I have never read anything quite like this. I snatched it on Pango because you know how in Pango you have to like reach a certain threshold sometimes to get free shipping. So it was like just the perfect amount I needed to get free shipping, and I was like, well, I already read it and loved it. Like this can easily be added to my weird books shelf, which is where it now lives. Okay, another one, I bought this after I'd already read the library book and was like, no, I need to own this, is Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead. Translated from Polish, it's kind of a literary thriller, I would say, and it's you just have to go in expecting nothing, just go along for the vibes of this like little old lady in the forest who loves nature. And the last like 15-20% of the book is where everything happens, and you just gotta hold on for dear life. But I loved it and I had to own it. This also now lives on my weird books shelf. Another one that I read the library book of and then found a physical copy used is the Book of Form and Emptiness by Ruth Ozeki. This is a chunk, and I think if this hadn't been on the Women's Prize for Fiction last year, and if I hadn't got the audiobook, I would have been so intimidated. I would have thought this was not for me, and I never would have picked this up. So shout out Women's Prize for putting this on my radar, encouraging me to read it, because oh my god, this was like in my top 5 reads of last year. I love this book so much. a little bit of magical realism. It's like a story within a story. One of the main narrators is a book that has like a connection with one of the other characters in the story. Grief and family and motherhood and childhood and what it means to be different or other as you're navigating like grief and family. And I loved it so much. I loved it so much. You're gonna notice I had my romance renaissance this past year. I'm currently still in my romance renaissance. Like, I have a whole pile of just romance that I've hauled and haven't read yet, but I do have some romance that I have read and have not hauled yet, so here they are. These two I bought new. This is a series of mine that I very deeply love. The Witches of Thistle Grove witchy romance, cozy fantasy, cozy romance series. I adore this series. The first book is Payback's a Witch. Read these back-to-back marathon style. The fourth and final book comes out this summer and I have it pre-ordered. I can't wait. I love this series. This has become my like adult comfort series. Angelica Frankenstein Makes Her Match, which is by Sally Thorne, who's also the author of like The Hating Game and some other like normal adult romance. And this is kind of like adult fantasy romance, retelling romance. It is a Frankenstein but make it romance retelling, and what I actually really loved and respected about this author is that at the end, in like an author's note, she literally uses the phrase Frankenstein fanfiction to describe this book and how she wrote it during quarantine in 2020 as like a way to escape and find joy in writing again, and then she published it. And the book itself was like okay, like probably a good fun vibey October read, but nothing really amazing, but I just I just enjoy like having this, and it was a fun time. Next we have some pink books. One is The Charm Offensive by Alison Cochrane. I bought this last summer, read it in like 1 or 2 sittings last summer. I think I bought and read this when I had COVID, and it was just like such a comfort, warm little hug of a book while I was so sick. And so I have that like odd memory attached to it, but it is truly one of the most special romances I've read. It raised the bar for what I expect from a 5-star romance for me, and it just, Alison Cochrane is an auto-buy author from me, and I'm just so happy. Not to spoil an upcoming vlog for you, but I have a 1-star and a 5-star read, and you can guess which is which. Funny You Should Ask by Alyssa Sussman. This is kind of a second chance romance with 2 different timelines, which are typically tropes that I'm not crazy about, but I really enjoyed how it was done in this book. I have foisted this book to multiple friends at this point, having only read this a few weeks ago. So safe to say, I did really enjoy this one, which I guess means that I did not super enjoy this one. This is Love in the Time of Serial Killers by Alicia Thompson. I read this for a vlog that you will see soon, and I just really, I thought, like most people of reviews that I've seen for this, I thought that it would go a completely different way than it ended up going. So she has this like paranoia about every man she meets being like a potential murderer, and then she meets a man who has some like questionable behaviors, and then the book just doesn't really live up to its own expectations. But I did buy it, but I will be unhauling it. Continuing the books I've already read that I haven't hauled yet. Train. I have volumes 1 and 2 of Lore Olympus. Read these, enjoyed them. Okay, don't quite get the hype yet, but the first one I thought was okay. The second one I enjoyed more than the first, so I'm looking forward to continuing with the series. But it is such a fresh and different and gorgeous take on Greek mythology, in particular the like Hades and Persephone myth. So I mean, like, I'm here for it. Anything Greek mythology, you know I'm down for that. Next, we have my super fun copy of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I picked this up when I was in LA last summer with the Roomies Digest, and I was drawn to it thinking like, oh, maybe it's a graphic novel version of Frankenstein, because it has these really cool like paneled covers and paneled inside flaps, but nope, it's just the cool edition that, what is this? Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition of Frankenstein. So shout out Penguin Deluxe marketing team, because I bought this book and now this is my favorite classic that I've ever read. I don't know if anything will top this being my favorite classic. I have a whole Frankenstein vlog where I read Frankenstein and a biography of Mary Shelley and some other like Frankenstein retellings. This truly like changed the game for me as far as like reading classics. I'll leave a link. I'm not going to leave a link for every single book, but this book I think is so cool that I will leave a link for this copy below. This is such a special book to me now. Next I have Fevered Star by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is the second book after Black Sun, which is a trilogy, I want to say. I really wanted to love this book. It just didn't quite meet that same like level for me as Black Sun did, but I think I still rated this a 4-star, but to me Black Sun is in a league of its own, and Fevered Star I think just had a case of like middle book syndrome. Wow. Guess how many books this is?
50.
Close. It's like 85. That's everything I've bought in the last year.
That's not bad for the whole year.
Yeah, and most of them are used.
Perfect.
Legends and Lattes, which I also bought last summer, and I think this was also maybe right before I got COVID, but this was just like such a comfy, cozy, low stakes fantasy, which I think is why it like went viral, like quite literally took off last year, but I'm a sucker for it with everyone else. This was also one of my favorite books I read last year. The prequel also comes out this year, and I think is like the backstory of the main character in Legends and Lattes, but if you needed one more person to tell you to read this, let me be that person. You should read this. The next one is All My Rage by Sabaa Tahir. I listened to the audiobook, but I hauled it nonetheless, and then a few weeks ago, Wes and I made a date night out of attending a lecture of hers because my local library like named All My Rage Book of the Year, so she came out and gave a lecture on it. Anyways, and she signed it for me, and I definitely fangirled. I was very unchill about the whole thing, but it was like so like fun and wholesome and exciting to like hear her speak about such a meaningful and special book like for her after writing like 4 fantasy novels, and then now she's back to writing fantasy again. This book also deserves all the hype and all of the love that it already has. Next is Whiteout, which is the really cool like holographic snow globe cover by Danielle Clayton, Tiffany D. Jackson, Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon. A really unique book. This is the same group of authors that wrote Blackout, which takes place like in the summer over 24 hours in New York City, where there's like a citywide electricity blackout. So in the same theme, this now takes place in Atlanta, Georgia, where it's also 24 hours, but it's a like a blizzard that just like forces the city to a standstill. And the particularly unique thing about this one is that we don't know, like we aren't told which author writes which stories. It's like a short story collection, but they're all interwoven. It's really just like a novel co-written by 6 people, which is just the most amazing like collaborative project, and I'm so obsessed. It was so good. I read the audiobook and loved it, and then like also had to buy it. Strongly recommend. Blackout also is great, but I loved this one even more. Just like such a good special read. I loved it. The next stack I did this last time too. They get their own dedicated stack. This is everything I bought for my own book club this past year, which has been through a couple of name changes since we did my last book haul. These days I'm calling my book club Silly Goose Book Club, but I now have learned not to get attached. So don't get attached to Silly Goose Book Club in case it changes again. I host a monthly book club where we read a pretty new-ish release that may or may not have some hype around it, and it just tends to center on women and non-binary folks with general feminist themes. We've done a couple of retellings, a couple of like speculative reads, but really, you know, we're just trying to have a silly, goofy time and talk about these books together. So in no particular order, here are my book club books that I have not hauled for you yet. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. I think this was our January or December pick this past year. Super fun book club. The thing that I've come to love about my book club is that we always have such a blast in the live shows. Like I just feel like so grateful to have such cool people reading and discussing these books with me. Like every single month is a fun time. So it's just like making me smile. But this was one of the recent reads. I have Phaedra by Laura Shepperson. I don't know why this was released straight to paperback, but it was. So here she is. This was a kind of like feminist twist on the myth of Phaedra, who is the sister of the Minotaur and the sister of Ariadne. And this was also really interesting to discuss. There was really a lot to unpack. One of the more heavy reads, I would say, for book club, but still a good time, even though this wasn't my favorite that we've ever read for book club, but I really did enjoy the discussion on it. Oh, this was one from last summer, Does My Body Offend You by Myra Cuevas and Marie Marcourt. We do a young adult pick every once in a while. I like to throw them in at least a couple times a year, and this was one of them. So this is a kind of a feminist young adult release from last year, where it's these two girls in high school together in Florida, and they are both going through some similar things and some very different things, and they just, through kind of some circumstances that throws them together as unsuspecting allies and friends, a whole bunch of things happen. It's one of those books that tries to do a lot, and I think suffers a little bit for it, but regardless, it's a book that I wish that I had had as a teenager in high school, and I would recommend it to anyone. Next, I have The Monsters We Defy by Leslie Penelope. This was another read from last summer. It's a urban historical fantasy, and this is such a particular like energy and vibe in my brain. It was just such a unique and fun read, and it was really like a getting the gang together magical heist story, but also had so much to say and so much commentary to give, and each of the characters were so like unique and flawed and lovable. And again, I don't know why this released right to paperback, but I'm not complaining, and we had a really good time. This one I might have hauled last year already, but I don't think so, because I think this was last June. This is When Women Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill. This is kind of a fantasy, but like just barely. Really, like the fantasy element is there as like a very on the nose metaphor for female rage, and I think it has struggled a little bit to find its audience, but it's really more of a historical fiction with just like 90% historical fiction and 10% fantasy maybe. But I really loved this. It again like has so much to say about feminism, righteous fury, female rage. I loved it. It was a great summer read. It was a great book club discussion. I feel like I'm losing my light. Next is The Memory Librarian by Janelle Monáe. We read this in the fall last year, and this is a collection of stories by Janelle Monáe that kind of accompany her musical album Dirty Computer, and it was just, I've never read a book that is also associated with a like musical work. And it was so amazing. I discussed this with Mo from the Roomies Digest, and it was like, I felt like Sherlock Holmes in that book club live stream, because both of us read the book and were confused, and then we're trying to piece everything together on the live show, and it was so fun. Great book, great read. I loved it. Our most recent young adult read for book club was Highly Suspicious and Unfairly Cute by Talia Hibbert. Which is a young adult romance that came out earlier this year, and this was just a great old time. I discussed this with a friend of mine who is a big Talia Hibbert fan. I've only read one other of her books so far, but we all loved this book, and it was just a very wholesome and sweet discussion for what I felt was a pretty mature and grown up young adult, not in like a content way, but just like the emotional maturity and intelligence of the characters. I really enjoyed. Oh boy, and then we have two of my favorite books from last year, including my new favorite book, period. Favorite book, period, is R.F. Kuang's Babel, which I read with Sid from Sid Bookworm last year, and my hand just felt my tabs in this book. I rarely annotate and I rarely tab, but this one really needed it, and I'm so glad that I did. I'm already dying to reread this. I don't even know where to begin. I am still planning to do a dedicated like video essay on this book, because there is so much to unpack on like history and colonialism and linguistics and the like magic in this book and just everything about this book. I could go on and on forever, but it is my favorite book now. And I'm so tickled that we got to also read this as a book club read together. I think the second half of this video will go by a lot quicker because I haven't read them, so I'm not gonna have anything to say about them. But we have two more former book club picks. One is Vita Nostra, which is actually looks so similar to Babel, like down to the font and everything. And these were both book club picks, but this one was actually a read for Found in Translation Book Club last year, which we were reading a bunch of books that had been translated into English. This was translated from Russian, and I believe the sequel was just published in English earlier this year. If you like weird, kooky fantasy that's gonna make your brain confused, but is really good somehow nonetheless, like, give it a try. But it definitely is weird, and I loved it. It's one of my favorite fantasies, and I'm excited to read the sequel. But you should know, it is very metaphysical. It is very, very weird. I feel like I'm not really selling it. It's great. I loved it, but know that it probably is a particular taste, but definitely my taste. Okay, and then last on the book club pile for now is Patricia Wants to Cuddle by Samantha Allen. This was such a funny book. This was like baby's first horror, comedy horror, like satire horror, where it's a spoof on The Bachelor, and it's down to like the final few contestants, and they travel to this like remote island in the Pacific Northwest, and there's like rumors about a mysterious monster or Bigfoot type of character. It just really goes off the rails. It was like probably one of the funniest book clubs that we've done, and it was a super short read, perfect for winter, and I had a good time. So those are all the ones that I have read and just hadn't hauled yet. And then I have this pile, which is all the books that I haven't read that I bought new, I guess, in addition to like my book club picks, because most of those are new releases. So really like this pile, right? Like I bought most of these new for book club. And then this pile, which is what, like maybe 20 or so brand new books for the year, which is not too shabby. Like that's 1.5 new books per month, usually for book club. I'm satisfied with that ratio. Anyways, this is the point of the video where I haven't read any of these now. It's just like books I've bought that I'm excited about, you know? First on the brand new stack is Amari and the Great Game, which is the second after Amari and the Night Brothers, which I read, loved, adored, and am so excited to dig into the sequel now. This is a middle grade fantasy series, like magic school's fantasy series, and I'm obsessed with everything about it. Then I have The Setup by Lizzie Dent, which is an author that I really enjoy. I hear no one ever talk about her. I feel like she's like a very underrated Emily Henry. I think actually she like blurbed this. Emily Henry has blurbed this. I'm pretty sure she blurbed the other one I've read of Lizzie Dent, which is The Summer Job. I really enjoyed it. I think I'm gonna really like this too. It just gives me really similar vibes as Emily Henry, just like a little bit off the beaten path, which I guess it is what it is, but I'm a sucker for that. F.T. Lucan's new release, So This Is Ever After, which I don't think is their new release. I think it just like came out in paperback, and I have their other book in paperback, and I wanted them to match, so I waited for it in paperback. I don't know if this is a sequel or like spin-off or brand new book series from their other book, which is In Deeper Waters, which is like a queer YA adventure fantasy, and I think this is along the same lines, but regardless, I was just so pleasantly surprised by the writing and the magic and how fun the other book that I read from them was, In Deeper Waters, that this was like, as soon as I saw it in paperback, it added to cart. I have noticed a trend recently with re-releasing classics in like a beautiful cover redesign, specifically pink redesigns. The first one is Lodor by Mary Shelley, because after reading Frankenstein, I was like, I need to read everything and anything by Mary Shelley, about Mary Shelley, that I could get my hands on. And I saw this cover and was like, I mean, I have to. And now I'm in the midst of, as we speak, writing a whole video essay on pink covers and what it all means, I guess. But anyways, classics in particular, I'm noticing a trend because the next one I have is Little Women, which I bought while I was visiting the roomies last year, and in like clear gloss is the names of all of them on the front, and I love it. This is my unofficial beginning of my pink classics collection, I guess. Next is Gleanings by Neil Shusterman. I had this pre-ordered, which is the prequel collection of prequel stories from the Arc of the Scythe series, and then I still haven't read it yet. I've heard mixed reviews, which is now making me a little bit hesitant to pick it up, but I really enjoyed and loved the Arc of the Scythe series when I read it in a read-along a couple years ago, and so I know that I will get to this, and I'm sure I will enjoy it, but for now, it's just been staring at me. Like, you paid for me in advance, and you still haven't read me. Okay, this one I bought earlier today. I just read this author's other book, and I will be reading their new book, this book, for a project, The Marriage Portrait by Maggie O'Farrell. I just read Hamnet and loved it, and I'll be reading this for the Women's Prize. And because I loved Hamnet and I own Hamnet, I figured, well, this is probably an author that I will be collecting anyway. So I bought this literally from Target earlier today. Historical fiction, by the way. Another book I had pre-ordered because I wanted to order a signed copy, which I got, is The World We Make by N.K. Jemisin, which is on my June Tarot Readathon TBR, so I will finally be getting to this month. But again, just like Gleanings, it's one that I had ordered, was so excited for, was counting down the days for, and then it's just been collecting dust since it arrived at my front door. But we're fixing that this month. This is the second and final in the Great Cities duology. It's urban fantasy. The thing that always comes to mind about this series is the idea of setting as a character, where in the first book it's very much like New York City is quite literally a character, and every borough in New York City is quite literally a character in the book, but in like a very fantastical way. And there's big bad villain, there's all these like fantasy elements in an urban setting, and this book, I think it's all gonna hit the fan, so to speak. So looking forward to it. I'm out of breath. Next is another one I purchased over the summer, is Dreadful Young Ladies by Kelly Barnhill, which I must have like just read when Women Were Dragons and loved it, and saw Kelly Barnhill had a story collection and was like, oh my god, like impulse buy. Not that I regret buying it, because this has such a fun, like a gothic spooky vibe, and I'm excited to read some of her short stories, because so far I've enjoyed everything that I have read from her, but this is one that I just never quite pick up. I struggle to pick up short stories. Regardless, I'm happy to own it. Okay, this one, talk about impulse buy. This, I know nothing about this. I've heard no one talk about it, but I bought it because it's called Battle of the Linguist Mages, which feels like living in a simulation. Like, this feels like this book was put on this earth for me to buy it and read it. So I bought it, and I just still have yet to read it. But I couldn't tell you a single thing about it, except that, like, it has all of my favorite words in the title, you know? So I think once I get to it, it's gonna be a blast. And I'm content to know nothing until I get there. Oh, this is a random one that I kind of forgot I also bought new, is City of Beasts by Isabel Allende. And I bought this purely because I had no idea that she wrote fantasy. Like, I'm familiar with her as a historical fiction writer and a nonfiction writer, and what I've read of hers in those genres I've enjoyed. And so then I happened to stumble upon apparently a fantasy series of her and was like, what is this range? Like, she just does everything? Like, I have to know. So I bought it and then haven't thought about it since. Like, I'm sure it's good, because everything else is good, but we'll see. Then I have this gorgeous paperback, Transcendent Kingdom from Yagazi, which I still have yet to read. Homegoing. I think owning Transcendent Kingdom, I will probably end up reading this before Homegoing, but one way or another, I will read through Yagazi's backlist. I think this is young adult or new adult. Maybe it's new adult, because I think they're college students, but this is The Ravens by Cass Morgan and Danielle Page, which I had to buy this. It's like has ravens in the title on the cover, but is also about like sorority girls and I think like a thriller or culty aspect, which is again like you're saying all the right buzzwords. So I really enjoy this like pink and black paperback covered like package. So I'm happy to own it, but it similarly is one that I just stare at it. Like it lives on the top of my TBR cart and I just, one day we'll get to it. I may have hauled this one already, I don't remember, but this is Salt Lick by Lulu Allison, which I bought from, I bought for the Women's Prize last year when I had aspirations of reading the entire long list. Like what kind of delusion was I under that I was going to read like 16 books in a span of a couple weeks? Whatever, we live and learn, but this was one that was longlisted last year that really stuck out to me and I just felt like I wanted to own it. Still haven't read it because that project crashed and burned. Climate crisis dystopian or like climate crisis apocalypse, and the other thing I know is that there's a POV from a cow, I think, which is like, I just think that's very intriguing and I'm looking forward to seeing what that's all about. Then the last book that I have on my I purchased it new list is Portrait of an Unknown Lady by Mariah Gainza, which I am embarrassed to say I haven't read yet because this was supposed to be our book club pick at one point for Found in Translation Book Club, which we just didn't continue on with this year. Maybe we just didn't have a live show that month and I got away with not reading it. I don't remember. An art dealer or an art forger, like a painting, what's the word I'm looking for? Counterfeit art? I don't know. Somewhere in the art crime world. It's still a book that I think I could get through really quickly and I'm still very interested in. It was translated from Spanish, so we'll get to it. Okay, here I have a little stack of books that are like gifts or souvenirs or I got for free, and then we'll get into everything else that I bought used over the course of the year. The top two on this stack, so I recently, if you didn't know, I went to Italy the first week of May with the author of Cultish and Word Slut, Amanda Montell, and a whole bunch of other really cool people, and I wrote a Substack about it, my Sillyverse newsletter. I have a whole very fun issue of my Substack if you want to check that out. And I bought two books while I was in Italy. And one is The Land Where Lemons Grow, which something I was really struck by, this is a nonfiction, something I was struck by in Italy was that the citrus trees everywhere, just everywhere are lemon trees and lemon groves. I had not expected there to be just such an abundance of citrus all over the place. And then I found this and it just felt like it was calling to me. So I bought it and I'm excited to read this as part of an upcoming project also. But yeah, this is the only book I bought in English from my trip because the other book that I will show you, these piles are getting tall. You can't even see them yet. Just trust me that these piles are getting a little precarious. The other book I bought on my trip is this amazing edition of My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, which it's in Italian. Okay, so I can't read a word of it unless I learn Italian, which I'm tempted to. But Elena Ferrante is a very celebrated, very famous author who is from Naples, Italy. And I bought this while I was in Naples, Italy, wandering the streets, having just a ball, and I stumbled into this Italian bookshop and found her book, like the first in her series, and it just felt like, you know what, I want to buy that. And so I bought a Neapolitan author, Elena Ferrante's book in its native Italian, and I'm just it feels really special to me. And the coolest thing about this is like Italian press is onto something, because this is like the HBO cover, but it's a paperback, and it's just like an extra dust jacket that they put on the original copy of the paperback, which is like, why don't we do that more? So I have the original cover, which is still nice and has like inside flaps for a paperback, which I love. But I also have like the special tie-in dust jacket if I want it. Why is no one else doing this? Anyways, this is really special to me and I'm just very excited to have it, whether I ever read it or not. Next, this is also a pretty special one. This is an arc of Kiss Her Once for Me by Alison Cochrane, which I entered through the author's Instagram. Like, she was doing a giveaway for a signed arc and I won, which like is wild. Like, Alison Cochrane hopped in my DMs and was like, what's your address? Like, you won the giveaway. So that was cool to have a signed arc of her new book last year. Read this and loved it. And it's just like the coziest, most fantastic little holiday gay romance. And it just feels like a hug. Then this is one I picked up from a little free library miraculously because it is like in perfect brand new condition and is a newer release. Stories from Tenants Downstairs. This is a collection of stories who all live in the same building and all have different gripes about the place they live, I think. I've heard really great feedback on this, so I'm excited to get to it, but I remember finding it in the little free library, like, that can't be right. Next to all of these like battered, worn paperbacks and kids books, you know, and then there's this like perfect copy of this really exciting book. Love it. Okay, then I have several gifts from Christine and Mo from the Roomies Digest because I just love them so much and they spoil me. The first one is Periodic Tales, A Cultural History of the Elements from Arsenic to Zinc. Monique and I were just cracking up together in a used bookstore about this book because Monique was like, that looks like a book you'd have in your house. Like, it's like strange niche nonfiction that seems like you would have it. And then I kind of flipped through it and was like, I do want this though. And Monique bought it for me. So it makes me smile every time I look at it because you're right. This is a book I'd have in my house, and now I do. Then another one that they bought for me last time they visited me is The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa. This is a book I've been meaning to read for a long time. One of my favorite podcasts years ago released an episode on this book, and ever since then I've wanted to read it. This is translated from Japanese and is kind of like a dystopian speculative book about like memory policing, you know? It's pretty on the nose, and I'm excited to get to it and understand all of the discourse about it. Okay, another one is Infinite Country. The Roomies were doing like a live giveaway with a whole bunch of different books, and I remember watching that giveaway and this book came up and they were like, oh, you should read this book, saying to their audience, guys, read this book because Noelle read this book and loved it. And I popped in the chat like, whoa, no I didn't. No, I have not read that book. But I'll take it, like I'll buy it. And so it was just a super funny moment and I still have yet to read it, but again, makes me smile every time I see it. Then very recently, they sent me Witches by Brenda Lozano, which is a magical realism book translated from Spanish that has been on my radar for some time now. And it's just like, I just haven't picked it up for whatever reason, but I won their Patreon like spin giveaway last month or the month before, and they were like, what do you want us to send you? And I was like, I don't know, you pick. And they sent me this because they love me and I love them back. Okay, then another gift I have that is just like so heavy to even hold up is Priory of the Orange Tree by Samantha Shannon. Literally, like, this is a brick, but Rachel sent this to me for my birthday last year, I think. And I just still haven't read it, but I know the sequel or companion novel just came out, so maybe I will read them together. But this, I'm gonna need to pep talk myself into it, even though I've heard pretty good things about it, but it's hard to just bite off a big book like this, you know? I'll see, you can see that one. Now here comes all of the unread romance that I have bought for myself used this year. Starting strong, I found a used copy of the special edition Ice Planet Barbarians. So I could not leave there without it. So now I have this, for better or for worse. Then I have The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. Oh, we have a blue theme going on. I have not read anything from Helen Huang, and this will be the first one. Can't wait. Then Emily Henry's Book Lovers, which I keep hearing is a lot of people's favorite of Emily Henry. The only Emily Henry I have read is Beach Read. So hopefully I like this. We will see. Emily Wibberley's The Roughest Draft. Something about me is that I love romances where the characters are in the publishing industry. I don't know why there are so many of those. Probably because it's not a unique thing to like that, Noelle. Like, a lot of people like romances in the book industry and publishing industry. But this is another one of those where I think both of the like love interests are writers on vacation or something. I don't know. I'm probably gonna like it. I don't think this one is a romance per se, but it is the same size paperback, so I guess I put it in this stack. I think it's more like comedy contemporary, but this is The Editor by Stephen Rowley, which maybe I was planning like a bookish vlog or something. I mean, not a bookish vlog, but like books about books in some way, because it's kind of coming back to me. That feels like something I would do, but I don't know a lot about it beyond that. Oh yeah, years of trying to make it as a writer in 1990s New York City. Like, that checks out. I'm sure it's great. Okay, then I also picked up Weather Girl by Rachel Lynn Solomon. I read and loved the X Talk when I read it a couple years ago. And I know that Rachel Lynn Solomon has another book coming out this summer, so I'm hoping to read Weather Girl before then, or maybe back to back. I think this was her book last year, where the X Talk is like podcasters. This is, what's the word for these people? Weather meteorologists. Meteorologists. So I'm sure that'll be fun. Haven't read a meteorologist love story before. Take a Hint, Danny Brown and actor Eve Brown by Talia Hibbert. I have read Chloe Brown and loved it, so I can't wait to get through the rest of the Brown sisters trilogy romance series. Chloe Brown set the bar pretty high, so we'll see. These, I feel like I'm gonna need to just like sit down and read them back to back, because just Talia Hibbert has such a particular romance storytelling style, and I just can't get enough of it, you know? Then I have Delilah Green Doesn't Care by Ashley Herring Blake. This is a sapphic love story that I think takes place like within the wedding industry. I don't know, but I think it feels like the time of year. Like spring, summer feels very much like wedding season to me, so I will probably read this sooner than later. Then the last on my little romance used stack is One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I am literally out of breath. This is another adult rom-com that has like a time travel element and takes place in New York City, which is all things that I love. I've heard mixed reviews, but I just predict that it will be one I enjoy. We're getting to it. We're getting to it. I have a pile of everything else fiction, and then a pile of nonfiction. And then that's it. Everything else fiction. The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. This is the third in the Broken Earth series, and I collected each of them individually, and I now own the whole series, even though I still have only read the first one. But one of my reading goals this year is to read all of N.K. Jemisin's backlist, so this will be read before the end of the year. Don't you worry. Then I found this on Pango, and am so intrigued and so excited. Caw by John Crowley? That has to be a pen name, right? You're writing a fictional book about crows and your name is Crowley? There's no way. It seems like a very unique fantasy, historical, like not myth, but like folktale, where it's someone telling the story of Dar Oakley, who is a crow with a name, who like lives in the land of the crows and has stories from the land of the crows. And honestly, I didn't need to know anything about it other than that it's a fictional folktale story with a crow in land of the crows. I'm sold. That's it. But I found this on Pango, so a bargain. This one I think is fun. I just don't know when I will get around to reading it, but it just seems like such a fun, creative experiment. This is Blast Furnace, Recreational Thief, graphic style, and it's like an exercise in improv as a creative team. 1 hour per page with 0 planning equals one sweet ass story. And I remember, so we were in a used bookstore in LA, and what convinced me to buy this, because I was like reading and flipping through thinking like, what a cool idea. the back, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but embossed in like clear, invisible print, it just says, "Buy this book." And I thought that was so funny. I had such a cackle to myself in the middle of this quiet bookstore that I was like, you got me. You got me. I'll buy it. Pride by Ibiza Boy. I love like the metal and the embossing and then like the spray paint. It even says a Pride and Prejudice remix. After my Frankenstein experiment vlog from last fall, it just set me on this train of wanting to read all of these like classic retellings. So I've been like slowly collecting them like a little retelling goblin. These next two, I swear, I found these used and somehow in just perfect, gorgeous condition. I just have great luck and great bookstores near me. TJ Klune's Under the Whispering Door. Newer release? I don't know if it's his newest release anymore, but I believe this has to do with cozy, wholesome purgatory, where it's like someone who kind of manages and watches out for when the dead pass through to the other side is the vibe I get. I can't believe I found this in such perfect condition, but I found The Atlas Six by Olivia Blake, which honestly wasn't a book that I had anticipated really needing to have on my shelves. When it comes across your path, it's hard to say no to for used like this. I don't really know anything about it. I know it's new adult fantasy. I know it has a TikTok following. That's all I really know. And that's okay. Phoenix Extravagant by Yoon Ha Lee, which is a book that I don't hear talked about very often, but I'm so excited to read this. It has a non-binary main character and is also a dragon fantasy. Like, hello? So this will be happening very, very soon. And it's blurbed by N.K. Jemisin. So it really checks all the boxes, you know? Then I can't believe I found this used to the theme of this haul, honestly. But this is a perfect hardback copy of Two Brothers by Fabio Moon and Gabriel Ba. They are two brothers. Fabio Moon and Gabriel Ba are brothers who wrote my favorite graphic novel, Day Tripper, which for a very long time was also like my favorite book that has been usurped by Babel, but like Day Tripper is still so special to me. And I haven't read their other work, which is wild. So I found this perfect, gorgeous copy on Pango and was like, oh yeah, no, you're coming home with me. Okay, another Pango find, Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder, which is like a weird book and also a literary book that explores like motherhood and art and like your life's work or life's purpose or whatever. And I believe she starts like slowly spiraling, thinking that she's turning into a dog, which sounds like the right amount of weird. And I keep hearing people that I really admire, whose taste really aligns with mine, really rave about this. So I think once I get to it, I will probably enjoy it. Next, I have Fates and Furies by Lauren Groff, which now I have two of her like most famous books in gorgeous hardback and have yet to read either of them. So that's got to happen soon. But she's an author and just a person that I really admire and respect. So I think once I get there, I'm like hopeful that I will love them. I will be really disappointed if I don't enjoy her writing, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Next, this I would have been content to own from the library, but then again found it on Pango for a bargain and was like, why not? It's The Seventh Function of Language by Laurent Binet, and I can't really tell you a single thing about it other than I think it's a mystery and it's supposed to be funny, and it was originally published in French. Now I have Chouette by Claire Oshetsky. This was so close to being a book club pick last year. Thought about making this a book club pick a few different times and it just never happened. But this is also explores surrealism, where this couple like struggles to get pregnant and then they finally have a baby, and then that baby, at least depicted in the book, is an owl or a bird. And so it's weird, but I'm all about that. I will be excited for that. Both the birds and the weirdness. This is my current read that I very recently picked up used also. An American Marriage by Tayari Jones. This won the Women's Prize for Fiction a couple of years ago. So it's, part of my reading for that project. It's like one of those books that's hard to describe, but is really just like about the lives of two people and what happens when their lives get impossibly messy. Like, it's a good read so far. So this will be moving on to my read shelves very soon. Then another one I was really thrilled to find so perfectly used on Pango is The Bad Muslim Discount. This follows like one Muslim family in the Bay Area, I want to say, over a couple of decades, and it's supposed to be both like a comedy but also very like intimate look about this family finding their way in modern America. And I've heard really good things. I really love like the colors and like imagery of this cover, and I'm excited to dive into it. This is a fun one, kind of a random one. Hungry Hearts, which is a short story collection. I don't know if it's a young adult story collection or just like a specific story collection, but it's 13 tales of food and love, specifically. Sounds like something I needed to own. I really need to do a short story project one of these days, because it's getting out of control, but I digress. We've been here for a while. I really do digress. I really said I was not going to go in depth, but I did it anyway. Another short story collection is Single Carefree Mellow by Katherine Heine. Short stories, but they're all connected, kind of like drawn through by one character that we see repeatedly, and I think just has to do with like what being brokenhearted can do to you and your other relationships is the vibe I get from like the summary, but we'll see. I'm willing to go into it without really knowing more than that. The next one that I bought from a friend on Instagram, I think. She was selling some of her books and I was like, I'll take that one. She sent me Legendborn, which I still have yet to read, but this was one of those books a year or two ago that just like took book internet by storm, and is a Arthurian retelling? Story, myth, fantasy. Knights of the Round Table. It's like chunkier than I had expected, not gonna lie. Okay, and then finally, the nonfiction pile. This is why I only do this once a year. This is long. First, I finally picked up Crying in H Mart by Michelle Zauner, which is a memoir that I've heard so many good things about, and I like to usually listen to memoirs on audio, but I couldn't resist the stinking buy one get one half off Barnes & Noble table. It gets me every time, you know? They know exactly what they're doing, and I'm a sucker for it. I will happily add this to my collection of memoirs. Then, to no one's surprise, I did pick up this used copy of In the Company of Crows and Ravens. It felt like a no-brainer. Like, I have to own a nonfiction about crows and ravens. It is the person I am. This I have recently read and adored. It's Carefree Black Girls, A Celebration of Black Women in Popular Culture by Ziba Blay, who is the writer and Twitter user who coined the term #CarefreeBlackGirls. And this is a collection of her essays about Black women in pop culture and kind of the way that she relates to them or their experiences or like mirroring things in her own life. And it was such a fascinating and passionate and emotional read, and I can't wait to read more from her because her writing style was spectacular, and the audiobook was read by her as well, which was just a joy and a delight. So it's one nonfiction that I highly recommend. Then I also picked up used Girlhood by Melissa Febos, which is essays about her experience going through girlhood and adolescence, and it's been on several TBRs that I have made and is still unread on my shelf, but I think this is in a TBR for a project I have in the works. This one I did buy new also. This is Unbound by Tarana Burke, My Story of Liberation and the Birth of the Me Too Movement. Is probably going to be a heavy read, but also a very empowering, a very inspiring read. And I have heard great things about the audiobook, so I think I'll probably hybrid read the two, but it was definitely one that I wanted to own and add to my memoir collection as well. Oh, this is cool. Okay, I forgot that I got this one. I think this was a Pango find. Our Stories, Our Voices, which is a YA essay collection, which is something I I feel like I never see. So alone, like the novelty aspect is really exciting to me. But the subtitle is 21 YA authors get real about injustice, empowerment, and growing up female in America. So this just felt like a book that I wanted to have. There are a lot of big names that have contributed to this, and so I'm just very much looking forward to it. And I think YA nonfiction is something I would like to see more also. Me, My Hair, and I, 27 Women, Untangle, and Obsession. So this is all about women and hair and culture and how that's all very often deeply connected. This is like also in like such good perfect condition for finding used. And it sounds like so interesting and fascinating. And there's so many authors also that have contributed. Like this is a collaborative collection of different essays, and it's so many people that I like recognize and have previously read from, and I'm really excited to see like their contribution to this like very specific like cultural phenomenon. The very last one is kind of a silly one. One that Monique commented specifically and said like, yeah, that makes sense. That seems like a book you'd have in your house. It's Divorced, Beheaded, Survived, a feminist reinterpretation of the wives of Henry VIII. Not much more to say beyond that. So that is the haul. That is the haul. This year's haul. That's why I only do those once a year. There is no way I'm doing that again for at least until next year. I would love to know any thoughts you may have about any of these books. Is there any I need to really boost up my priority list? If you made it to the end of this video and want to leave me an emoji just for fun, let's do the lemon emoji. You know, just in honor of adult lemonade and my book that I bought in Italy. If you'd like to check out any more of my content, I have a Instagram where you can find me just about every day. And I have my Substack that I send out 1 or 2 times a month that's called The Sillyverse. You can subscribe, it will be sent to your email. I have a couple other fun links in the description also. And in the month of June, if you're seeing this and you want to participate in the Tarot Readathon with us all month long in June, we have a whole Discord server where you can join us for those fun little shenanigans as well. Thank you so much for watching. Give your dog a big ol' hug for me, and I will see you very soon. Love you, bye!